She boarded quiet, seat 13F, a shadow in the morning light. But the sky remembered her name, Raven, fierce, unseen, and bright. F-22s whispered, engines roared, and the world would not ignore asterisk before we dive into this incredible story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell icon so you never miss an amazing tale like this one. Now, buckle up and get ready to meet Claire Donovan, the woman in 13F who the F-22 pilots would never forget. The airport was half asleep that morning. A gray dawn light spilled across the wide glass windows, touching the quiet faces of passengers waiting for their flights. Businessmen scrolled through emails, parents hushed children with juice boxes, and retired couples clutched travel brochures with shaky hands. Among them, in a worn leather jacket and faded jeans, sat a woman who looked almost invisible. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back, and her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen more than most could guess. She sat quietly in the boarding area for Flight 276 to Dallas. Ticket tucked inside her passport. Her name was Claire. Donovan to the others around her. She was just another traveler, another stranger in line. But what nobody noticed was the way she scanned the room, reading faces and details without effort. A habit she couldn't break. A habit from another life. As the boarding call echoed through the speakers, Claire stood, lifting her small carry-on. She moved with quiet purpose, not rushing, not dragging. Yet two men near the counter exchanged a look. One whispered, "That her?" "Doesn't look like much." The other smirked. "She's washed up. Just some ex-military nobody. Look at her, flying commercial now." Claire heard them. She always heard things others thought were hidden. She didn't flinch, didn't answer. But she felt the familiar burn in her chest. The sting of being dismissed. The sting of being forgotten. When she boarded, she found her seat. 13F, a window seat over the wing. She tucked herself in, placed her bag under the seat, and leaned her head against the glass. To anyone else, she was a woman on her way to Texas. To herself, she was someone trying to stay invisible. But life had a way of pulling the invisible back into the light. The plane lifted, engines roaring as the city below fell away into toy-sized streets and houses. Claire closed her eyes, letting the vibration of the engine settle her nerves. It had been years since she left the Air Force. Years since her call sign, Raven, was spoken in the skies. She had walked away after one mission that broke everything inside her. Walked away from the medals, the respect, the camaraderie. Now she lived in a small rented house in Ohio, working nights at a warehouse, mornings at a diner. People thought she was strong, but they didn't know the cost. They didn't know the memories she carried. At 38, Claire felt older than she was. Every scar, every insult, every dismissal, it weighed on her. But she had learned to live with silence until this flight. Somewhere over Tennessee, the plane shuddered. A ripple of unease ran through the cabin. A pilot's voice crackled. Overhead, calm but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Claire looked out the window. The sky was clear. No storm clouds, no reason for turbulence. And then she saw them. Two F-22 Raptors sliding into formation, sleek and deadly against the blue. Their silver bodies shimmered in the sun, wings tilting in precise movements. The cabin buzzed with whispers. Passengers pressed against windows, phones raised to record. A little boy shouted, "Look, jets!" But Claire knew better. Fighters didn't just escort passenger planes for fun. Something was wrong. The captain came back on, his voice tighter this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is unusual, but not a cause for alarm. We have Air Force jets alongside us. Please remain calm and in your seats." Gasps, nervous laughter. Questions. Claire's stomach sank. She stared at the Raptors, their noses pointed straight at the plane. She recognized the way they moved, the way they communicated without words. She had once flown with pilots like that, Dot, and then, through the static of the cabin intercom, a sound slipped through. Not meant for passengers, but caught in the system. A voice, sharp and precise. Confirm passenger list. Seat 13F, call sign Raven. Claire's blood went cold. The Raptors knew her. She gripped the armrest, her breath slow and steady. Around her, people whispered, laughed nervously, filmed videos for social media. Nobody knew what that call sign meant. Nobody knew that the quiet woman in 13F wasn't just a traveler, but the pilots knew. And if they knew, then others knew. Memories surged back. Nights in briefing rooms, days in simulators, missions that ended with fire and loss. The betrayal that sent her home with nothing but scars. The commander who told her, "You're finished. We don't need you anymore." She clenched her jaw. Finished or not, the sky hadn't forgotten her. Claire forced herself to stay calm. If she showed fear, others would notice. Already, the man beside her, a heavy-set salesman with a laptop open, was glancing at her suspiciously. "You hear that?" he asked. "They said 13F. That's you, right? What's going on?" She gave a thin smile. Probably nothing. Just a mistake. But her eyes never left the Raptors. She could almost feel the pilot's eyes on her. Could almost hear their voices. As if years hadn't passed. Raven. The name echoed in her head. Once, it had been spoken with respect. Now, it was a target. And Claire knew this flight was only the beginning. The airport was half asleep that morning. A gray dawn light spilled across the wide glass windows, touching the quiet faces of passengers waiting for their flights. Businessmen scrolled through emails, parents hushed children with juice boxes, and retired couples clutched travel brochures with shaky hands. Among them, in a worn leather jacket and faded jeans, sat a woman who looked almost invisible. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back, and her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen more than most could guess. She sat quietly in the boarding area for Flight 276 to Dallas. Ticket tucked inside her passport. Her name was Claire. Donovan. To the others around her, she was just another traveler. Another stranger in line. But what nobody noticed was the way she scanned the room, reading faces and details without effort. A habit she couldn't break. A habit from another life. As the boarding call echoed through the speakers, Claire stood, lifting her small carry-on. She moved with quiet purpose, not rushing, not dragging. Yet two men near the counter exchanged a look. One whispered, "That her?" "Doesn't look like much." The other smirked. "She's washed up. Just some ex-military nobody." "Look at her, flying commercial now." Claire heard them. She always heard things others thought were hidden. She didn't flinch, didn't answer. But she felt the familiar burn in her chest. The sting of being dismissed. The sting of being forgotten. When she boarded, she found her seat. 13F, a window seat over the wing. She tucked herself in, placed her bag under the seat, and leaned her head against the glass. To anyone else, she was a woman on her way to Texas. To herself, she was someone trying to stay invisible. But life had a way of pulling the invisible back into the light. The plane lifted, engines roaring as the city below fell away into toy-sized streets and houses. Claire closed her eyes, letting the vibration of the engines settle her nerves. It had been years since she left the Air Force. Years since her call sign, Raven, was spoken in the skies. She had walked away after one mission that broke everything inside her. Walked away from the medals, the respect, the camaraderie. Now she lived in a small rented house in Ohio, working nights at a warehouse, mornings at a diner, people thought. She was strong, but they didn't know the cost. They didn't know the memories she carried. At 38, Claire felt older than she was. Every scar, every insult, every dismissal, it weighed on her. But she had learned to live with silence until this flight. Somewhere over Tennessee, the plane shuddered. A ripple of unease ran through the cabin. The pilot's voice crackled. Overhead, calm but strained. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Claire looked out the window. The sky was clear. No storm clouds, no reason for turbulence. And then she saw them, 2 F-22 Raptors sliding into formation, sleek and deadly against the blue. Their silver bodies shimmered in the sun, wings tilting in precise movements. The cabin buzzed with whispers. Passengers pressed against windows, phones raised to record. A little boy shouted, "Look, jets!" But Claire knew better. Fighters didn't just escort passenger planes for fun. Something was wrong. The captain came back on, his voice tighter this time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is unusual, but not a cause for alarm. We have Air Force jets alongside us. Please remain calm and in your seats. Gasps, nervous laughter, questions. Claire's stomach sank. She stared at the Raptors, their noses pointed straight at the plane. She recognized the way they moved, the way they communicated without words. She had once flown with pilots like that. And then, through the static of the cabin intercom, a sound slipped through. Not meant for passengers, but caught in the system. A voice, sharp and precise. Confirm passenger list. Seat 13F, call sign Raven. Claire's blood went cold. The Raptors knew her. She gripped the armrest, her breath slow and steady. Around her, people whispered, laughed nervously, filmed videos for social media. Nobody knew what that call sign meant. Nobody knew that the quiet woman in 13F wasn't just a traveler, but the pilots knew. And if they knew, then others knew. Memories surged back. Nights in briefing rooms, days in simulators, missions that ended with fire and loss. The betrayal that sent her home with nothing but scars. The commander who told her, "You're finished. We don't need you anymore." She clenched her jaw. Finished or not, the sky hadn't forgotten her. Claire forced herself to stay calm. If she showed fear, others would notice. Already, the man beside her, a heavy-set salesman with a laptop open, was glancing at her suspiciously. "You hear that?" he asked. "They said 13F. That's you, right? What's going on?" She gave a thin smile. Probably nothing, just a mistake. But her eyes never left the Raptors. She could almost feel the pilots' eyes on her, could almost hear their voices. As if years hadn't passed, Raven. The name echoed in her head. Once it had been spoken with respect. Now it was a target, and Claire knew this flight was only the beginning. The briefing room felt colder than it should have. The overhead lights hummed faintly, their sterile glow bouncing off white walls and polished steel tables. Claire didn't sit. She stood with her arms folded, her posture rigid, watching the images on the big screen. It showed a convoy in flames. Smoke coiled upward like black ribbons. The scene was raw and brutal, the aftermath of an ambush. Soldiers scrambling, helicopters circling overhead, chaos everywhere. Her jaw tightened. She knew what she was looking at. She had seen too many scenes like it before. "What is this?" she asked. General Hawley leaned against the table, arms crossed, his eyes steady on her. Southern Turkey, 3 weeks ago. A strike team went down. Not by accident. Who? "That's the problem," Hawley said. "We don't know for sure. But we've seen tactics like this before. The signature is familiar." Too familiar. Claire looked back at the burning convoy. A sick heaviness grew in her chest. She forced her voice to stay calm. Say it. Hale's jaw clenched. The Black Vulture Group. Her hands curled into fists. The name alone made her skin crawl. She knew them. Everyone in her old world did. A rogue paramilitary outfit. Ex-pilots and mercenaries. Men who played both sides of every conflict. They had money, weapons, and no loyalty to anyone but themselves. Years ago, Claire had faced them in the air. And years ago, they had cost her everything. She whispered the words like venom. They're still alive? Hale nodded grimly. Alive. And stronger. Claire forced herself to sit, the chair cold against her legs. She leaned forward, eyes fixed on the general. What does this have to do with me? You've got hundreds of pilots. Hundreds of soldiers. Why drag me off a plane in the middle of nowhere? Hale studied her for a long moment before answering. Because the vultures know us. They know our people, our tactics, our machines. They've been outsmarting every squadron we send after them. But they don't know you. Claire let out a harsh laugh, shaking her head. Don't know me? I was the one who put half of them in the ground. I'm the reason they went underground. In the first place. Exactly, Hale said. You're the ghost they thought they buried. And that makes you the only one who has a chance of bringing them down now. The words hit her like a strike to the chest. She leaned back, her pulse quickening. No, I'm done with this. You threw me out, remember? You and your board, your hearings, your paperwork. You called me reckless. You told me I wasn't fit to lead. I built my life out of the ashes you left me in. And now you want me back? Her voice cracked with anger, but her eyes burned with something deeper. Hurt. Hale didn't flinch. He let the storm pass, then spoke in a quieter voice. You think I don't regret that? She blinked, startled. He continued, You were the best, the sharpest. But after what happened over Kandahar, the politics were against you. They wanted a scapegoat. I couldn't protect you. I failed you. His words stirred the wound she had carried for years. That mission, the one that haunted her dreams, the one where she lost her wingman, Jake Torres, her best friend, her brother in the sky. Everyone had blamed her, said she was too aggressive, too stubborn. That she pushed him into the fight that killed him. She had lived with that guilt every day since. Claire looked down at her hands, trembling despite her control. Jake died because of me. Don't dress it up as politics. I made the call. I live with it. Hale's voice softened, just slightly. And now you have a chance to make it mean something. The silence in the room was heavy. Claire stared at the images on the wall again. Burning vehicles, dead soldiers, families who would never see their loved ones come home. Her chest ached. She had promised herself she'd never go back. That the Air Force, the call signs, the missions, all of it was in the past. But justice. Justice was harder to ignore, Dot, she whispered, almost to herself. What do you want from me? Hale straightened. His eyes were steady, his voice sharp again. We want you to lead an undercover flight unit. Small, off the books, no official records. You'll be paired with pilots who don't know you, and you'll teach them how to fight the vultures on their terms. You'll be our shadow, our weapon in the dark. Claire shook her head slowly. And when it's done, what then? Another court-martial? Another discharge with my name smeared? Hale leaned forward, his gaze cutting into her. When it's done, Raven, the world will know what you really are. She flinched at the name. Raven. The call sign that once made her heart swell with pride. The call sign that turned into a curse the day Jake died. Her hands trembled against the steel table. Finally, she said, I don't want redemption. I just want the truth. You give me that, you clear my name, you expose the lies, and I'll do it." For the first time, Hale's hard face softened. He gave the smallest nod. "You have my word." The door opened suddenly. A younger officer stepped in, a tablet in hand. His face was pale. "Sir, they've hit another convoy. This time in Jordan." Claire's heart pounded. Halle looked at her, his eyes sharp and burning. "You see, we don't have time. I need Raven in the air. Now." The weight of the moment pressed down on her. The years of exile, the whispers, the insults, the long nights wondering if she had wasted her life. And now, here she was. Given a choice, she could walk away, back to Ohio, back to anonymity. She could stay the invisible woman in seat 13F. Or she could step back into the sky, face the ghosts that haunted her, prove to herself and to the world who she really was. Claire stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice was low but steady. "Where's my plane?" The hangar doors slid open with a thunderous groan, and the smell of jet fuel hit Claire like a forgotten memory. The cavernous space stretched out before her, rows of sleek aircraft gleaming under bright lights. F-22 Raptors, newer models, fresh. Paint, fresh pilots. Her chest tightened. This was home once. And yet, it didn't feel like home at all. General Halle walked beside her, his steps steady. A group of young pilots stood near one of the Raptors, laughing among themselves, their helmets tucked under their arms. They looked barely old enough to rent a car. Their flight suits were crisp, their eyes brimming with arrogance and hunger. Halle gestured toward them. "Meet your team." Claire's jaw clenched. She had expected this. She had expected resistance. One of the young men, tall and broad-shouldered, looked her up and down and smirked. "You're kidding, right? She's our lead?" Another chuckled, shaking his head. "What is this? Bring your mom to work day?" The laughter spread. A couple of the younger women pilots smiled tightly, but didn't say anything. The disdain was clear in their eyes, though, the same look Claire had seen 100 times before. Too old, too slow, too broken. She folded her arms and said nothing. Hale's voice cut through the noise. "Listen up. This is Claire Donovan. Call sign Raven. She's the reason any of you even have a chance against the Black Vulture group. You'll follow her lead, or you won't last 5 minutes out there." The smirking pilot raised an eyebrow. "With all due respect, sir, the Black Vultures are mercenaries, not legends. We can handle them without babysitting." Claire finally spoke, her tone cool, even. "What's your name, Lieutenant?" He straightened slightly. "Holt, Jason Holt." Claire gave him a thin smile. "Tell me, Holt, how many combat hours do you have?" He puffed up his chest. 120. She tilted her head. Simulated or real? His smirk faltered, mixed. She stepped closer, her voice dropping low enough for him to feel it. "I've got over 1,000, real, against enemies who didn't care if I came home. You may be good, Lieutenant, but you haven't bled yet. Until you do, you don't get to laugh at me." The hangar went silent. Holt's jaw worked, but no. Words came out. Claire turned and looked at the rest of them. "You think I'm washed up? Fine, think it. But when those mercenaries lock onto you, when the sky goes black with missiles, you'll wish you had someone who's already been through hell. And you do. Like it or not, I'm here to keep you alive." For the first time, there was no laughter, only silence. Training began the next morning. Claire was back in a flight suit, the fabric stiff, the helmet heavy in her hands. As she zipped it up, she caught her reflection in the locker mirror. Her face looked harder now, older. But her eyes were the same. Once in the cockpit, everything came rushing back. The hum of electronics, the hiss of oxygen, the way the controls fit into her hands like they had never left. She whispered to herself, "Hello, old friend." Lee. Engines roared to life, vibrating through her bones. The Raptor rolled onto the runway, the horizon stretching wide. And then, takeoff. The rush of power, the earth falling away, the sky opening like a long-lost embrace. For the first time. In years, Claire felt alive. The training drills were brutal. Dogfights in the skies above the base, simulated missile locks, high-G maneuvers that left the rookies gasping. Claire was relentless. She pushed the young pilots hard, exposing every weakness, every blind spot. They cursed her under their breath, rolled their eyes, mocked her when they thought she couldn't hear. But she heard everything. During one drill, Lieutenant Holt tried to outmaneuver her, banking hard to shake her tail. His voice crackled over the comms. "Let's see if Grandma can keep up." Claire's lips curled into a smirk. She pulled her Raptor into a vertical climb, flipping over him in a dizzying arc, and locked onto his 6 before he even realized what had happened. Her calm voice filled his headset. "You're dead, Lieutenant." The other pilots laughed, but this time not at her. At him. Holt cursed under his breath. By the end of the day, sweat poured down Claire's back, her body aching. But the fire in her chest burned bright. She had been underestimated before, but never for long. That night, she sat alone in the barracks lounge, sipping black coffee from a paper cup. The young pilots clustered at another table, their voices hushed, but their glances pointed. Finally, one of the women, a dark-haired lieutenant named Reyes, approached. She sat across from Claire, her face guarded. "You're tough," Reyes said simply. Claire raised an eyebrow. "That a compliment?" Reyes gave a small smile. "More than you'd think. Holt, he runs his mouth. Don't take it personal. He's just young." Claire sipped her coffee. "I was young once too. Doesn't excuse arrogance." Reyes studied her. "They say you used to be the best. That true?" Claire's eyes dropped to her cup. Memories stirred. Jake's laughter, the roar of missions, the court-martial hearings. "No," she said softly. "I wasn't the best. I just survived." Reyes didn't reply. She simply nodded, as if that was answer enough. Over the next week, the mood shifted. Slowly, grudgingly, the young pilots began to respect her. They stopped laughing as much. They started listening when she spoke. Holt still bristled, still rolled his eyes, but even he couldn't deny her skill in the air. One night, after a particularly brutal drill, Holt approached her in the hangar. He looked uncomfortable, his helmet tucked under his arm. "You're good," he admitted grudgingly. Claire smirked. That sounded painful to say. He gave a half-smile, shaking his head. "Just don't expect me to start calling you ma'am." "I'd prefer you didn't," she said. For the first time, she felt a crack in the wall between them. But even as the training forged respect, the missions outside grew worse. Reports came in daily. Convoys destroyed, bases hit, pilots lost. The Black Vulture group was escalating, striking with precision and fury. And one night, Hawley called Claire into his office. His face was grim, the lines deeper than before. "They've gone too far," he said. "Satellite confirms they're next. Target, a civilian aid convoy outside Amman. If they succeed, it'll be a massacre." Claire's stomach twisted. Hawley looked at her with steady eyes. "This is it. You and your team deploy at dawn." In the quiet of the barracks, Claire sat on her bunk, staring at the floor. The room was dark, the only sound the faint hum of the base outside. She thought of Jake, of his laugh, his easy grin, the way he used to say, "We're untouchable, Raven. Sky's ours." Her throat tightened. She whispered into the silence, "I won't fail them. Not this time." Sleep didn't come that night. Only the steady beat of her heart, growing stronger, harder. Tomorrow, the sky would call her name again, and this time she would answer. The sky over Jordan at dawn was a pale, cold blue. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows over the desert plains below. Claire sat in the cockpit of her F-22, the canopy reflecting her steady, determined eyes. Her team of younger pilots lined up behind her, tense but ready. Holt's jaw was tight, Reyes' eyes sharp, and the rest of the squadron stared at her with a mixture of admiration and anxiety. Claire's hands gripped the controls, feeling the familiar vibration of the engines beneath her. The wind whistled past the fuselage as they lifted off in formation, the desert sprawling endlessly below. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "Time to face the ghosts." Their intelligence had pinpointed the Black Vulture convoy, heavily armed, moving under the cover of darkness. Satellites had traced their route to a remote desert canyon. Tale had stressed precision. Any civilian presence, any mistake, would be catastrophic. Claire let her squadron low, skimming above rocky ridges, dodging radar sweeps. The tension was palpable. Even the young pilots, who had begun to respect her, now looked to her for every decision. And then the first sign, a heat signature, flickered ahead. Trucks, helicopters, armed men on the ground, moving quickly to set up defensive positions. "Engage on my mark," Claire said, her voice calm, but commanding over the comms. "Holt, Reyes, take point left. Ramirez and Chun, cover the rear. We move fast, we move precise, we move together. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," they replied, crisp and professional. The vultures hadn't expected anyone this close. There. Radar systems scrambled at the sudden appearance of raptors, slicing through the morning light. Claire's first attack was surgical. Missiles streaked from her Raptor, disabling the lead transport without harming the surrounding vehicles. Explosions lit the canyon like fireworks, throwing sand and debris into the air. Holt's voice came through the comms, sharp and tense. "Raven, you're too close. Pull back." "I've got it under control," she replied, flipping her jet into a steep climb to evade incoming fire. The young pilots followed, their movements hesitant at first, but growing sharper with every maneuver. Claire barked instructions, correcting angles, adjusting targeting, predicting enemy responses. She felt alive. Every cell in her body was firing on instinct and experience. And then she saw them, the real vultures. 3 modified helicopters, heavily armed, moving with lethal precision. Claire's stomach tightened. These weren't just mercenaries. They were experts. And they recognized her too. The dogfight began. Missiles whistled past her canopy, tracer rounds slicing the air. She rolled, twisted, and dove, feeling the G-forces press her into the seat. Holt lagged behind for a moment, narrowly avoiding a missile that tore through the canyon below. Reyes covered him, taking down 2 enemy drones, while Ramirez and Chun kept the rear secure. Claire's comms were alive with panic, focus, and determination. "Keep it tight. Don't break formation. Target the lead helicopter. Now." Her missiles found their mark. 1 helicopter exploded in a fireball, sending shards of metal spinning across the canyon. The remaining 2 retaliated, forcing the squadron into evasive maneuvers. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrifying chaos. Amid the battle, Claire noticed a familiar figure in one of the helicopters. Someone she hadn't expected. It was Marek Vos, a former pilot she had once trusted in covert missions, the man who had betrayed her years ago and helped orchestrate the attacks that ruined her career. "Vos," she whispered, gritting her teeth. He smirked as he spotted her, clearly recognizing the call sign she hadn't used in years. "Raven," he called out over comms. "I wondered when you'd show up." Claire's fury ignited. "You'll pay for what you did." The fight became personal. She chased him through the canyon, weaving between rocks and enemy fire. Her squadron followed, covering her six and taking down mercenaries who tried to flank her. Voss was skilled, almost as skilled as she was. Every maneuver he made was a reflection of her own training, a dark mirror of what she had taught others. But she had something he didn't, experience tempered by hardship, and a fire fueled by years of betrayal. Minutes stretched into eternity. Finally, Claire saw an opening. She flipped her Raptor upside down, diving into a tight loop, and launched. A missile that struck Voss' helicopter. The explosion rocked the canyon. Sand and fire erupted. Voss ejected, but Claire tracked him, locking him in with her targeting system until rescue teams could apprehend him. She didn't celebrate. The canyon was littered with debris, mercenaries, and the echoes of chaos. She felt exhaustion seep into her bones. But she also felt something she hadn't in years. Control. Power. Justice. Back at Maxwell Base, the squadron landed, engines whining as they came to a halt. Hawley met them at the tarmac, his expression unreadable. Status report. He demanded. Claire's voice was steady. Mission accomplished. Voss captured. Convoy secured. Minimal collateral damage. Hawley nodded once. You did well, Raven. All of you did. Holt approached, still panting. Ma'am, I underestimated you. Claire let out a tired, small smile. Welcome to the team, Lieutenant. The young pilots exchanged glances, respect written in their eyes. They had seen her in the air, watched her navigate impossible odds, and realized that the woman they once mocked was their best chance at survival. Later, Claire sat alone in the lounge, staring at her reflection in the window. Her hands were still shaking slightly. She thought of Jake, of the weight she had carried for years, of the court hearings, the whispers, the doubt, and for the first time in a long time, she felt it. Vindication. She wasn't just a ghost anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was Raven, a name feared and respected, a call sign that had carried her through the worst of skies and still shone bright. Outside, the sunset painted the horizon in gold and crimson. Claire closed her eyes and breathed in deeply. She had survived, she had led, and she had proved that strength and experience were never something to underestimate. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, she let herself feel the weight lift. She had reclaimed her name, her honor, and her place in the sky, and she knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever dismiss her again. The following morning, Maxwell Base was alive with activity. Pilots prepared their aircraft, mechanics adjusted panels, and command officers studied the latest intelligence reports. But amidst all the motion, Claire felt a quiet calm. She had flown, fought, and survived the impossible. The Black Vulture group had been struck down, Voss captured. Yet she knew the true battle wasn't just in the skies, it was in the recognition of her own worth. Hawley called her into his office. The walls were lined with commendations and framed photographs of missions past. He gestured toward a small table where paperwork lay waiting. This, he said, is an official recommendation for reinstatement. Full rank, full clearance. Everything that was taken from you, returned. Claire stared at the documents. The familiar words, official seals, signatures proof that the world had finally acknowledged her. She swallowed hard. All of this. Really? Hawley nodded, his gaze firm. You earned it. You led your team, took down the vultures, and proved that your skills are unmatched. No one can question Raven again. Word of the mission spread quickly through the base. The young pilots, who had once mocked her, approached, now filled with genuine respect. Holt stepped forward, his face serious but honest. Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I judged you without knowing you. I see now what it means to fly with Raven. Claire's lips curved in a faint smile. It's not about respect. It's about doing your job and keeping people alive. But thanks. Reyes stepped up as well. You've shown us what it means to be brave, to lead, and to sacrifice. You're the reason we made it through that canyon. Her chest tightened. The acknowledgement of her team meant more than any medal, more than any formal document. For years, she had been underestimated, mocked, dismissed. Now, the younger generation of pilots looked to her as a leader, a mentor, and a legend. The final act of justice came later that week. Voss, the man who had betrayed her, faced military tribunal. Claire testified, detailing his attacks, his tactics, and his deliberate betrayals. Her voice was steady, controlled, but laced with authority. The court listened. The evidence, combined with her first-hand account, left no room for doubt. Voss was sentenced, his reputation and influence dismantled. For the first time, Claire felt the full weight of closure. After the trial, Halle approached her again. "You wanted the truth," he said. "You have it. And now everyone knows who Raven really is." Claire nodded. "It's not just about... It's about all the pilots who've been underestimated, overlooked, dismissed because of politics, age, or bias. If my story stands, theirs can too." That evening, Claire returned to the quiet of her barracks. She sat by the window, the horizon painted in gold and crimson like it had on the day she led the mission. She held her flight helmet in her hands, running her fingers over the scratches and scuffs, a testament to survival, skill, and sacrifice. For a long moment, she simply breathed, letting the calm settle over her. She had faced betrayal, injustice, and the shadow of her own guilt. She had returned to the skies and confronted every challenge. And now she had emerged whole. She whispered to the silence, "We made it, Jake. We made it." For the first time in years, she allowed herself a small, private smile. Not for medals, not for recognition, but for herself. She had proven her strength, her courage, and her worth. Outside, a night sky stretched endlessly, full of possibilities. Claire Donovan Raven stood ready for whatever came next. No longer just another traveler in 13 F. She was a force to be reckoned with. A story of resilience and justice. A legend finally recognized Dot, and in the distance, the faint echo of F-22. Engines carried her name across the skies, a call sign reborn, powerful, and unshakable.